Today, using the power of Python, I'm going to show you how to read a secret key from a config file. Use that key to call an API, read the JSON response, and parse information out of it. And you can tell that I'm a serious programmer because I have an old t-shirt. So let's get started. We're going to be calling the Open Weather API to get the weather in our local area. Don't worry about spending any money. You can see that you get 1,000 calls a day for free, so that should cover it. This is the URL so that you can go to that website and make your own account. Be sure to do that before we go any further. Here in Notepad, I've detailed the endpoint that we're calling. So you can see there's the base URL. And one of the parameters is the zip with the zip code and the country code. That's Jacksonville, Duval, Florida. The other is the AP PID, which is the secret key that Open Weather has given me to call their API with. The next thing we need before we get coding is a folder to keep our code. So I went to the repos folder on my local drive and created a new folder named Python Weather, because if I were creative, I would be doing web design and not back-end coding. Okay, we're all set up to start coding. Let's go into Visual Studio Code and open that folder I just created. Drill down to it. Now we can see it up there on the left side. We're going to open a terminal now because we want to make a virtual environment for our Python project. So once again, I'm picking a boring name for the virtual environment. Let's call it Weather. If you look up on the left side, now you can see Weather. Let's activate it. And weather scripts activate. And you'll see that the command prompt changes, so now the little weather's in front of it to show that we're in that virtual environment. Let's start with a config file. We'll make it an INI file. INI stands for initialization, and it's a simple format with sections and keys. You might ask why I'm not using XML, JSON, or something really cool like YAML. And that's because in my day, we all used INI files and we liked it. So you can see that we have a section called Open Weather, and we have a key and the secret key that I'm sure none of you will use to hack my account. Let's create a file to read our INI file. We're going to import the config parser module, part of the main library, and we will specify the name of our file. We'll call it config file. That's the name, config INI. Then we'll create a config parser object. We'll name that config. And we won't use semicolons because Python doesn't use semicolons. Okay, so we have the config object. Let's read our config file. Now we're going to print the information from that file. Well, we're going to print the section just to prove that we can read the section out of it. So now we run the code expecting to see the section name, but much to our dismay, we don't, which makes no sense because we have the right name and that file is in the same location as the script is running. So I really don't know why that doesn't work. If you do know why, tell me in the comments and I will give you a special mention in the next video. So what I'm doing is just making sure we have the right path. I'm importing the OS module, and you can use this os.path.directory name to get the directory name, the path to the directory name. Now I'm updating the config file, and what I'm doing there is I'm joining this path along with the name config.ini just to make sure that it'll find it, because apparently it doesn't find it the other way. Now don't leave a 0 at the end. That's always bad. And so when you run it, it says, hey, you left a 0 at the end of the line. That was foolish. So I went back and I fixed that. And I run it, and hey, we see Open Weather. So now that I know that I can read the file, my next trick is to prove that I can actually read that secret key out of the file so that I can use it. I knew I could read the section. Can I get the value from the key? So this is the syntax to do that. And we can see that I did get the secret key. So the next step is to take that base URL that I showed you earlier, the one in the notepad, and then we have some parameters, the zip code and the secret key. And then once we have that set up, we just make the call to the endpoint. We set a variable named response, and we make a request to get that base URL. Now request is underlined because it's really supposed to be requests, but since I'm relatively new to Python, I goof that up. So we're going to see me struggle a little bit with that for the next few minutes. But what I'm trying to do is I'm going to try to take that response that we got from the request and get the JSON out of it and put it in a variable called data. Okay, now I'm starting to say, well, why is that? It should be green. It shouldn't have some underline under it. That makes no sense. Oh, maybe I need to import the requests module. See, I should have known, because that ends with an S, I should have known at that point that I should have said requests, not requests. But I don't have that module, so now I have to use the package installer, install requests, and it does. And once I do, it's still underlined, and I finally figure out it needs an S, so now we're ready to go. Let's run that, and it says, hey, wait, Jenny isn't your API key. You just made that up for the video. That's true. The jig is up. It is actually not Jenny. It's a much different key, so I'm going to change it now. So now I go back to the Python code, but I forgot to save my changes, so hilarity ensued. I didn't show that part. I fixed it, and I ran the code here, and we will see all the JSON data come back. So we see lots of different values in here, and we can see something unusual. The temperatures are 300 some degrees. That's not right. It turns out that Open Weather API uses Kelvin. So if we're going to properly display the weather, we have to do a little bit of math here. So, but first, let's just pull that weather value out. So we saw that it was in main, and under that it is temp for temperature, not for temporary. That puts the value from the JSON into the temp Kelvin. Now we have to do a little bit more. First of all, we have to spell Fahrenheit correctly, probably the biggest challenge of this coding. Then we have to subtract 273 because science, that gives us a Celsius value. Then if you remember from 8th grade that you multiply by 9/5 and then add 32 to get freedom units, otherwise known as Fahrenheit. And then we print the temperature. If I could spell, we'd print the temperature. We run the code, and we see that we get a value of 89.4. So let's see what Google says the real temperature is. It's 88. I don't know. Maybe this API and Google get their data from two different places. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video about how to use a endpoint, how to read a config file, how to read JSON, how to use Visual Studio Code, and I will see you at the next video.